I'm going to walk through SAML and SCIM configuration for Zscaler Internet Access. Then we're going to walk through SAML and SCIM configuration for Zscaler Private Access. So in Zscaler Internet Access, I go to my admin console, admin.zscaler2.net. I'm going to sign in with my credentials here. So hit my landing page, I'm going to go to Administration, Authentication Settings. I want user repository type is hosted DB. Zscaler will create a database of entries that it receives from SAML as it consumes SAML authentication requests or responses. And it will also create the database based on the SCIM provisioning push from the IDP. So we want hosted DB. And then we want authentication type is SAML. And then we go to the identity providers. So we come to identity providers here. I click add IDP, and I want to add another IDP for a subset of users' locations. I'll delete this old one once I'm finished. So I click next. I'm going to call this one Okta, and then we're going to come across to, we're going to pause there briefly. I'm going to come across to Okta. So we're going to, I'm logged into my admin console for Okta, come to applications, and I'm going to browse the app catalog. Here, I will search for Zscaler. We want Zscaler 2.0. And you can see here it's Zscaler Internet Access. So I add integration. I'm going to call it Zscaler Internet Access. My domain is zscaler2.net. That's the cloud that I'm on here, Zscaler 2. Obviously, if you're on your different cloud, you would enter the different cloud name there, and then we click next. We want to select here SAML 2.0. We can ignore relay state because we're not doing IDP initiated sign-on. We want to send across attributes, so we're going to send across two sets of attributes. We're going to send across display name, display with a capital N for name, and we're going to enter a value of user.firstname plus inverted commas a space and then user.lastname. So Mark space Ryan. And then we're also going to enter department, and this is user.department. And then we're going to scroll down here, and then attributes, we're going to send across member of, which is the groups, and we want to send across groups that start with the word Internet. We don't want to send across all groups, just the groups that begin with the word Internet, because that's what Zscaler is going to apply policy on. There's no point in telling Zscaler that the user is a domain admin. We can then click Done. We're happy with everything else that's in here. You might want to customize some other attributes at that point. We come across to sign in. Don't assign it to users yet. We're going to do that later on. Go to sign on. And we need to click View Setup Instructions. So there's a couple of things in here, kind of walk you through a couple of things, but we need to take this portal URL, so we're going to copy that, come across to Zscaler, there's the portal URL. The attribute that comes across in the subject is called name ID, capital N for name, capital I, capital D. We need to upload the SAML certificate, so we come across to here. Here's the certificate. We're going to click this link, and you'll see it's downloaded as okta.pem. So we can upload that file here, choose file, and it's called okta.pem. Upload. It has to have the extension .pem. We can select in here that it's Okta. Doesn't make a great deal of difference. And we need to make sure that sign SAML request is disabled because Okta does not support signed auth-n requests. And we want to enable SAML auto provisioning, and we know that this is display name for the display name attribute, member of with a capital O for of, and department is department. We will leave SCIM blank for a minute because you need to enable this before we configure SCIM. So we click Save. we can now activate. We can now set this as my default IDP. And activate that. And I can delete my old one. So I don't need to worry about my old one. You invariably won't have that. Okay, so we now have SAML configured. I can now click edit on this, and I can come in here and I can enable SCIM provisioning. So we've got a couple of things here. Here are my, my tokens. I'll copy that bearer token. In fact, what we'll start with is this URL here, this part of the URL here. So this is the SCIM URL. So I'll come across to my Okta console again, and I will go to provisioning. I want to configure an API integration, enable API integration. The ID is that numerical part of that token, and then I can copy my bearer token and I'll paste that in there. We'll come back across to here, we'll click save. And we'll click activate. Now we can test our API credentials, verified successfully, and we can click save. Don't need to save any of that details. Now we need to come in here, click edit, we enable each of these things. We want to Okta to tell Zscaler when users are created, the attributes assigned to users, and when users are deactivated. So we'll click save. So now we have SAML and SCIM configured. We can go to assignments, we can assign to groups, we'll select everyone. Whoops. Assign to groups, everyone. We'll click assign, we'll click done. So now everybody is assigned the Zscaler Internet Access application, SAML, push new users, user deactivation is enabled. Zscaler Internet Access, SAML and SCIM configuration is now enabled. Let's do the same. Let's go to Zscaler Private Access, configure SAML and SCIM here. So we'll click sign in. We'll go to administration, IDP configuration. I can add an IDP and we'll call this Okta, and I will select my domains and click next. Now here I have the service provider URL and entity ID. So again, we'll come across to applications in Okta, and I will browse the app catalog and I will search for ZPA, and I will select Zscaler Private Access 2.0, click Add Integration. We'll call this Zscaler Private Access. We'll click Done. Okay, so sign on for Zscaler Private Access. We'll click Edit. As you see, SAML 2.0 is already defined. We need to copy the service provider URL and entity ID. Now these are unique, so we'll copy service provider URL and paste it in there. Entity ID, paste it in there. We'll click save. We'll click View SAML Setup Instructions, and here we have the metadata. So we'll copy all of this metadata, and we'll go there's our metadata. We'll save as into my downloads folder. We'll call it okta.xml. We'll click Save. We'll come across the private access. Now we can click Next, select the file, we'll call it open up okta.xml, and you'll see it's uploaded the certificate, single sign-on URL, entity ID, it's enabled. Now we need to untick signed SAML request because Okta does not support signed auth-n requests. We want disabled HTTP redirect because it's a post binding. SAML attributes enabled for policy, and we'll leave SCIM disabled for a second so we can click Save. So now we have SAML configured. We can come in here and click Edit. We can enable SCIM sync. So we have the endpoint, copy that, and we'll come across to Okta now, and we'll go to Provisioning, Configure API Integration, Enable API Integration. So there's the base URL. We paste in, come back to private access, and generate the bearer token. It'll only just be displayed once, so you copy it to the clipboard, and now we paste it in there. Now we can click Save, and if we come across to Okta, we can now test the API credentials, and it was successfully established. So we click Save, and our integration is established. We can now, in the provisioning, we can edit this because we want to enable Okta to push to Zscaler when users are created, attributes are updated on the users, or users are disabled. Click Save. Now I can go to Assignments, and I can assign to groups. And we'll again go everyone. And we'll click Assign. We'll click Done. So now we have SAML and SCIM configured for Zscaler Internet Access and Zscaler Private Access. We come across to Private Access now. We can go to SCIM users, and we can see those users have already been created and pushed to Zscaler Private Access. We can see the groups. Might take a second to come across, and we can see SAML attributes that have come across for those users. In Zscaler Internet Access, user management, we can see those users have also been created. We can see the group Internet enabled, and we should see some department information come across. So now we can come to our command line. I can run my cat install. This will install the Zscaler client with the arguments for user domain and the Zscaler cloud. So this will auto provision Zscaler client connector. So we'll run the install script. It'll ask me to authenticate. It'll go ahead and install Zscaler client connector. We'll see that pop up as it installs. By prompting for these, by pushing user domain and the cloud name, it means that when Zscaler Client Connector launches, it'll automatically authenticate. So let's run through that so you can actually see the authentication process. Okta is configured for Kerberos authentication, so I've reset my Kerberos tickets. When I click login here, it'll automatically redirect to the Zscaler cloud, which automatically logs me into Zscaler Internet Access, automatically logs me into Zscaler Private Access. I can see that I've got my authentication token for Okta for Kerberos. That's why I did transparent single sign-on into Okta. I open this up. Private access, internet access is all authenticated, and my policy is flowing through. So we've now configured SAML and SCIM provisioning for Zscaler Internet Access, SAML and SCIM provisioning for Zscaler Private Access. We've deployed the Zscaler Client Connector, and the Zscaler Client Connector has performed the SAML authentication to Internet Access and Private Access and federated the user in If I was to update the groups in my IDP, remove this user's access, SCIM would push that across to Zscaler and revoke my access programmatically. Hope this was useful.